everybody at the Fed was a closet inflationist. They just didn't want to come out of the closet and admit it because, you don't want to admit to something like that when you're on the Fed. I mean, because people think they're the firemen. They don't think they're lighting the fires. But now you have the Fed coming out and telling you, we're going to light the fires. We're a bunch of arsonists and we're going to go out and set fires. And people don't think that that's a problem. But one person who does think it's a problem is Alan Greenspan. Very ironically, the maestro himself was on CNBC yesterday. And I caught that interview live. And, as Alan Greenspan gets older and older, right? And you hear him talk, he sounds more like me and less like his prior self. And in fact, if you hear him talk in different settings, he's even more concerned than he appeared on CNBC yesterday. But remember, I think Alan Greenspan is the most knowledgeable of the Fed chairman that we've had since Greenspan, right? So if you compare Greenspan's understanding of economics and banking and money and all that, he towers above Bernanke, Yellen, and Powell, right? And he's the guy that wrote the playbook that these guys are following. The difference is he knows it doesn't end well. Right? I think he wrote that playbook knowing that it was going to lead to disaster eventually, but he didn't care. He, at the time, Greenspan just fell in love with his own popularity. He was the hero of Wall Street. Everybody loved him. And, it went to his head. And, that old saying about power corrupting, well, it certainly corrupted Greenspan, absolutely. I'm sure Ayn Rand was doing somersaults in her grave. They used to be buddies. In fact, he wrote a very, very brilliant piece, The Case for Gold, which was in Ayn Rand's Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, which is a great book that my father gave me to read very early on when I was a young man. I read that book. I think I was I might have read it in high school or college. I can't remember, but it was one of the earlier introductions I had to both Rand and capitalism. But Alan Greenspan's essay is there. And, you can still read that. It's online too. So the guy who wrote that obviously understands fiat money and central banking. And he was a big critic of the Fed. And the next thing you knew, he was the leader of the Fed, right? And so he kind of, instead of, trying to dismantle it from within, he then really tried to legitimize it. And he's the one that started to say that, well, he looked at the price of gold. When Alan Greenspan was a Fed chairman, he admitted that he watched the price of gold quite closely. And of course, when he was Fed chairman, it was around, $400 an ounce, $300 an ounce. I forget the exact price. But if you listen to his old interviews from the 90s, he will mention that he watches the price of gold as a measure of whether his monetary policy is good, right? Because he says if the price of gold is rising too much, then obviously I'm too easy. I'm creating too much inflation. And if the price of gold is falling too much, then maybe I'm too tight and I need to ease up. And what Greenspan was claiming, even though he's a gold bug at heart, he said, we're smart enough now, the central bankers, that we can supply the same discipline that gold did, which was all BS. He had no ability to do that. But he was saying that we're going to substitute the judgment and the wisdom of central bankers for gold, but we're still going to use gold as kind of a barometer so that even though we're not officially on a gold standard, unofficially, we're going to watch the price of gold to kind of keep policy in line. And if we see the price of gold going up towards 400, well, we're too easy. And now if it goes down below 300, we're too tight. And so gold is going to be a guidepost. So we're not just, in the dark here. So he recognized the importance of gold and, what the implications are and what it says about monetary policy, even though he wasn't advocating a return to the gold standard, which is something he advocated at one time, before he was the Fed chairman. But so he's on CNBC yesterday. And of course, now, gold is over 1,900 an ounce. So based on the criteria that Greenspan used to use to judge himself, if he applied that same gold standard to Powell, well, Powell is failing. Clearly, if you're supposed to watch the price of gold as an indicator of whether or not you're too loose or too easy, and you got gold over 1900, it's obvious that you're too easy. And Greenspan has the same opinion because when he was asked by whoever was interviewing him, I forget who it was, but the question he was asked was, what's your biggest concern? What worries you the most? And his answer was inflation. Right? That's what's worrying Greenspan the most. And again, ironically, inflation is actually what Powell claims to be his biggest worry. But they're worrying about the same thing for the opposite reason. You see, Greenspan is worried about inflation because he thinks there's too much of it. He thinks inflation is going to be too high. That's why he's so concerned about inflation. He's worried about inflation running out of control. Powell, on the other hand, is worried about inflation being too low. So you have two people, one a former Fed chairman and one the sitting Fed chairman, both looking at the same data points and coming to the opposite conclusion. I mean, the polar opposite. They both pinpoint inflation as the biggest threat. Greenspan, who used to be the chairman of the Fed, who's the longest serving chairman ever, and who we call them the maestro, this guy is saying, I'm looking at the data and I'm worried inflation's too high and it's going to get worse. And Powell, looking at the exact same data, says, I'm worried about inflation too, but I think it's too low. I'm worried that we don't have enough inflation. We need to create more. We need to go out of our way to get even more inflation because we don't have enough. So how is this possible, right? How can a prior Fed chairman have the exact opposite opinion of the current Fed chairman? Because one of these guys is right and one of these guys is wrong, right? They can't both be right when they have opposite opinions. So one of them is going to be right and one of them is going to be wrong. And my money is with Greenspan. As I said, he wrote the playbook. He knows how it ends. Powell has no idea how this thing ends. He doesn't understand the playbook or the rules. He doesn't know how the game works.